Wow, look at this crowd. Incredible, huh? It's a little bit overkill standing up here with a microphone, but we have just a little bit left in the book of Genesis. Probably 2 more weeks after that, so we're just going to have a short spring season of the Midweek Fellowship, and the month of June kind of off enjoying the summer with families, and then we start back up the Gospel of Mark in the park, July and August. But just look forward to being with you all in Genesis here. And just to remember, it's the book of beginnings. It's the beginning of seeing God's heart for humanity in his creation of humanity. He made us in his image to reflect him and to represent him in the world and to be fruitful and multiply and go throughout the world, sharing and spreading his glory in the world. Of course, we know the fall happened right after that creation mandate and just messed everything up royally. By one man's sin entered the world, Romans tells us. And yet even there in the judgment for that sin and the judgment that plunged the world into the bondage of corruption, willingly, God judicially judged the world in the fall with a purpose, Romans 8 tells us, with the purpose of the glorious gospel redeeming all mankind. And so from Adam and Eve, we have Cain and Abel, who Cain killed his brother Abel, and that was an absolute bummer for more reasons than just a murder, because there in the garden at the fall, the Lord said that through Eve's seed, the serpent's head would be crushed. And so it seems like there was spiritual warfare going on. There was one of the hopes of redemption in Abel, there being killed right off early on in the story of humanity. And but we just see that story continues through the book of Genesis, that through Eve's seed, the serpent's head would be crushed, and through her line. And so that line kind of goes through the book of Genesis and all the way to just the world becoming so wicked and so corrupt that God judged the world in a flood, but saved a few, Noah's family there through Noah's ark, and the picture of the gospel that the ark is of God saving a family who would trust the Lord and believe the Lord when maybe it didn't seem like it made sense, that the world that had never had rain and never seen a flood and not much use for boats, and yet he was to make this Titanic, to save God's created beings, the animals and Noah's family. And not long after Noah's family in that judgment where God promised he would never flood the earth again in wrath, promised with the sign of the rainbow, remember. It was after that the Tower of Babel was made. Sinners quickly spread again right after Noah. And they wanted to make themselves gods, or to be as gods, or to ascend to the heights of heaven. The same temptation that Eve faced in the garden, that she would be as God, knowing between good and evil in the same way that God does. And so the Lord judged that, and the world had people spread throughout it, but with confused language. And we see that that creation mandate did happen through that spread, the multiplication and the spreading. And we see on the day of Pentecost that the Tower of Babel is reversed, and that all the languages would come together in the gospel and in the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And then we're introduced to this man from Ur of the Chaldees named Abram. And just by God's grace, he chose Abram to to be the one that seed would come through. Out of all the people, it was through Abram's family. And even though Abram was old in age and had a wife, Sarah, that was old in age, the Lord was able to make a promise to Abraham, known as Abram at the time, that he would number in his family as the stars in the sky or as the sand in the seashore. And there's a number of promises to Abraham with those pictures and metaphors. And, Abraham just believed the Lord. Believed the Lord. And there's this wonderful phrase that Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him as righteousness. He just believed the Lord, even though it was a promise that physically could never happen, but God, right? And so the story of Abraham from that point is, could God really do this? And time goes on, and Sarah helps out with the plan by giving her handmaiden, an Egyptian woman named Hagar, to Abraham to make a baby with, and they did, right? Ishmael. And but the Lord says, it's not through Ishmael that I'm going to provide salvation to the entire world, but through a son you'll have with Sarah. And so more time goes on. I think something like 20 years goes by before Sarah finally has the son named Isaac. And when Isaac was just a lad, that the Lord told Abram to take his son, his only son whom he loved, and go to the mount called Moriah and there sacrifice him for me. And Abraham believed God. The book of Hebrews tells us that he was so believing the Lord that it was through Isaac that the seed would bless the whole world, that I'm going to obey the Lord even if he tells me to slay my son, and the Lord is able to resurrect him even if I do that. And so they head towards the land of Moriah, which, by the way, we have a Moriah visiting us tonight. So sorry, Moriah, you probably love to be pointed out in public. But I also named my daughter Lainey Moriah, from Mount Moriah, which you visit when you go to Israel. And it's the mountain where Abraham would offer Isaac, where Orannon's threshing floor is, where David offered the sacrifice to stop the death from the census in 2 Samuel. It's where Jesus would offer himself up on the cross. Oh, before that, it's where Solomon would build the temple. So it's this wonderful place where the Lord had chosen to build the house and sacrifice his son, Mount Moriah. And so Abram stacks the wood on his son's back, and his son, his one and only son whom he loved, walked the hill, bearing the wood, a type of Christ, you probably know. And as he's on the way, do you know what the son Isaac says to Abraham? My father, the wood we have and the fire we have, but where's the lamb? And what did Abraham say? God will provide for himself the lamb. Or literal translation is, God will provide himself the lamb. And there, when they got on the top of the mount, and Abram built the altar and laid Isaac upon it and bound him and raised the knife and just about plunged that knife into Isaac's chest, the angel of the Lord said, "Stop, don't harm the child." Right? And now I know that you really trust me and would obey me. And there over in the thicket was a ram caught by its horns. And that's where Abraham named that mountain the Mount Moriah, for it is called the Lord shall provide, right? So Isaac was the next son in line that would bear that seed that would crush Satan's head. And Isaac had a son. He had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob was born second out of this twin group. And yet he was conniving, he was a deceiver, and him and his mom tricked Father Isaac to get the blessing from Father Isaac and also the birthright from Father Isaac. You guys know that story with not so much, you would call it a trick, but Esau despised his birthright and traded it for a bowl of stew, lentil stew. I made lentil stew here one night for Wednesday night Bible study, and nobody seemed willing to try it, let alone trade their birthright for it. Even when I said it had bacon in it, right? But he was so hungry, Esau was, that he said, "What good is my birthright to me if I'm dead? Give me the stew." And so he traded it for stew. The book of Hebrews tells us that was connected to his immoral heart that didn't even care about the family call to be a blessing to the whole world. And so there was that, the birthright, and then there was the blessing on Isaac's deathbed when Jacob dressed himself up like Esau, put hairy skins on his arms, and didn't disguise his voice. He still had the high, effeminate voice when he went in and talked to his, maybe not effeminate, but the arms are yours, but the voice is, the arms are Esau's, but the voice is that of Jacob. "Oh, sorry, I had something stuck in my throat, Dad," and he stole the birthright. We've been studying Jacob for a number of months over the last couple sessions, and how he fled because he was afraid his brother Esau would kill him for stealing the blessing and the birthright. He went up to Padan Aram and lived with Uncle Laban. On the way, he met a gorgeous gal that he fell in love with and said, "I'm going to marry her." Turns out it was his cousin, And he worked 7 years for his cousin, Rachel. And then on the wedding night, Uncle Laban tricked him and put older sister Leah in the room instead. And then he said, "Well, you can have Rachel too, but it's not our custom to let the younger daughter marry before the older. And so work for me another 7 years, and you can have Rachel as well," right? So Jacob's getting a little taste of his own medicine, being the conniver and the trickster. And so as he worked, there's a beautiful phrase there but the years seemed as only a few days to Jacob because of the love that he had for Rachel. And so Jacob knew that it was time to go back. The Lord had appeared to him. It was time to go back home. And when he tried to he just knew, I won't be able to work with father-in-law, uncle-in-law, both of those in the same man. And so he escaped by night, made it down, wrestled with the Lord on the mountain, you might remember, and had his hip dislocated. He was named Israel there on that mountain. He reconciled with brother Esau, camped out in Mamre for a number of years. He had 12 sons that would grow. Not all those sons were born at the same time, obviously, but and finally I'm doing fast forward. This is 60,000 feet through the book of Genesis. And then as he got there, his time finished in the place of Mamre, the Lord said, "Okay, you need to go back and see Dad." So then we have Jacob with his 12 sons favoring the second to youngest son, Joseph. He loved Joseph out of all of his other sons because Joseph was the son of his old age. And so he favored him, gave him better responsibilities around the family farm, gave him a special garment, the coat of many colors. And Joseph was a dreamer. You guys know he had 2 different dreams that we read about. One that there were 11 bundles of wheat in a field, and they all bowed down to his bundle of wheat. And that made all the brothers so mad. "What are we going to bow down to you?" Right? And then there were 11 stars in the sky and the sun and the moon, and they all bowed down and worshiped his star. And even mom and dad rebuked him, but they kept it in their heart. What does this mean? And the brothers were so jealous that one day when Joseph went to visit them in the field, they plotted in their heart that they would murder him. And so they jump him, they throw him in a pit, And Reuben has the good sense out of all the brothers to say, hey, let's not murder him. He said, and then he went away and was hoping to take him back to dad and maybe gain good favor with dad again. And while he was away, Judah said, oh, here comes some Midianite traders. Let's not kill him. We'll have his blood on our hands. Instead, let's sell him. And so they sold him to these Midianite traders who would take Joseph down to Egypt, where the Lord was with him and showed him favor, got him a great job as a slave in Potiphar's household. And Potiphar's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph and regularly, day in, day out, tempted Joseph to come lie with her. And he would say these beautiful words, how could I do this great sin and sin against my God? And at one point, in the last straw for her, she lied with me and grabbed his garment, and he pulled away, as Paul says to the Corinthians, flee sexual immorality. And he fled, and he ran away with such force that it ripped his garment off in Potiphar's wife's hands. And to save face, she cried out that there was an attempted rape, and that my husband brought this Hebrew man into our house to embarrass us. And so Joseph was put in prison. As much as I taught this and studied it over the last year, I don't remember the number of years that he was in prison, something like 15 years or something like that. The butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker all had dreams. Well, the baker and the cupbearer had dreams, and they were prophetic. Joseph was able to interpret them, and only the cupbearer survived. He ends up back before Pharaoh. Pharaoh has a dream of the gaunt cows, 7 gaunt cows coming out of the Nile and gobbling up 7 fat cows. And Pharaoh has a dream of 7 skinny heads of grain devouring 7 fat heads of grain. He's very troubled by this. His cupbearer hears about it and says, there's a man that I know that I totally forgot about until just now. It'd been like 3 years. And he interpreted my dream. I bet he could interpret yours. So they go, they get Joseph, they clean him up, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams that there will be 7 years of plenty where they could store up a lot of good grain, and then 7 years of famine where they would eat upon that grain and use those reserves up. And so Pharaoh was so pleased that he made Joseph second in the land of Egypt. Nothing could be done without Joseph's permission. He was governor of the land. And so he began his task of storing up all the grain into the storehouses. And as the famine began, his brothers came down from Canaan, starving and hungry, to look for grain. In the last number of weeks in our study, we studied these brothers coming and Joseph recognizing them as the brothers that sold him into slavery. His heart was tender to them, and he messed with them a little bit. He tested with them a little bit just to see where they were at these days. They saw that they had a loyal heart to their dad and to their littlest brother, Benjamin, and he would reveal himself to those brothers. And it was an incredible reunion, one for the books. Oh, it's in a book, so that's good. A tearjerker, they call it, you know. And so finally Joseph says, go back and get dad and bring him down here, and we'll take care of him during the famine. And so far, that's the book of Genesis in maybe 100,000 feet. You know, we might have been like the astronauts that just orbited the moon and came back, you know, like, I see the little divots, you know. And I think you just saw the little divots in Genesis. You're like, I saw the divots in your story. I'm not sure that totally added up. Okay, well, that's neither here nor there. And so we find ourselves in Genesis 46, the incredible part where Jacob is coming down with his sons and his grandsons. There's going to be 70-something people in all, direct descendants of Jacob, who would make this journey And he's going to see Joseph for the first time in something like 20 years since he was told his son was murdered or killed by a wild animal. So verse 1, Israel took his journey with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And so Israel, remember that was his name once it was changed Israel from Jacob. And he'd seen God's faithful hand to even protect his son and provide for their family through the famine. And so seeing God's plan just working in the Lord's faithful hand, he goes on this journey, and at the southern part of Israel, in fact, we'll refer to this map just a couple times tonight. Google screenshotted it myself today. So we have, I keep forgetting, I have a brand new laser pointer. I leave it at home. So we have Israel, which is the north-south coastline here. You see Jerusalem. To the right of Jerusalem is the Dead Sea. We visit that when we go to Israel. And then down south of Jerusalem by the Gaza Strip is Beersheba. All right? And that's really the southern part of the kingdom of Israel is Beersheba, or Beersheba as we call it in American. And so you'll read about Beersheba a lot in the scripture. We see it, first of all, when Abimelech and Isaac make a covenant. In Genesis 26:33, Isaac calls this place, they made a covenant, they dug a well, and he calls it Sheba, and it got the whole name Beersheba. It's called that to this day, Genesis 26 tells us. So he's made this journey. You already see he's gone south quite a ways through what looks like a lush and well-watered land, obviously, by the map. And what does he do there? He offers sacrifices. He worships. He's going through a big change in his life. A lot is going on. He's leaving the land of promise. He's trusting the Lord. He's wondering how it's all going to work out. He's being reunited with his long-lost son. Maybe some of you have had life experiences like this, and maybe you're going through a life experience like this. Everything's changing, shifting. There's a famine. It's exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Maybe for you, what you're going through is terrifying and terrifying all at the same time, or exciting and exciting all at the same time. But what does he do? He worships. He offers sacrifice to the Lord. And that's a good thing to do when we find ourselves in these places. And I've found myself in a place like that over the last few months. And even today was just found myself cranking up the worship music I had just studied this morning. I was like, it's time to worship the Lord and just trust the Lord. And so he offers sacrifices, and he knows in his heart who it's to the God of his father Isaac, to the God of the covenants, to the God of his grandpa Abraham, to the God of his great-grandpa Noah, and then a few more before that, Adam, his fathers, and he worships there. And you know what? The Lord referred to himself as that to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. He would say, I'm the God of your father. So trust me, right? In fact, he often says that in regards to the land of promise. I'm the God of your father Abraham. Behold, anywhere that your foot can trod right here, and anywhere that you can see from Mount Horeb, all the way around from the sea to the river, popular chant these day and age, from the river to the sea, is yours, right? And but he says, but I'm the God of your father. I made the promise to your father. I made the promise to your father's father, and your father's father, right? And so he's worshiping the God of his father. And in verse 2, God spoke to Israel in the vision of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. I find it, Israel, interesting. I find it real interesting, or Israel interesting, that the Lord doesn't call Jacob Israel here. He named him Israel. From now on, your name shall be called Israel. And if the Lord is anything like me, we get the names mixed up sometimes. You know, I have what I call in my heart 4 daughters, 2 biological daughters, and lately it's getting Tatum and Lainey mixed up name-wise. And so it's mostly with Tatum, and I call her Lainey like nonstop. And I've just been messing up royally with that one. I haven't quite mixed up Senny and Lainey yet, you know, that's not as hard, you know, but I've been messing that one up big time, and I always get in big trouble for it, you know. And maybe the Lord just forgot. Oh yeah, that's right, I named you Israel. We know the Lord didn't forget. But he calls him Jacob, Jacob. And we're going to see something in this chapter that's interesting. By the way, we're going to move rapidly through many verses that is genealogy, right, or that is names. But God is the God of names. He cares about names. He knows us by name. And there's a few places in Scripture where there's Jacob, Jacob, or Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel is raised up to be a leader in Israel and anoint the king of Israel. Or Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul would become Paul and would become one of the great apostles and contributors of the New Testament. He's the God of names. He cares about names. It shows what a personal God he is. He knows your name. We used to sing a song, you know, in the 90s. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that cries, that falls, and he hears me when I call. And so it's not because of the song that it's biblical, but there's a song because it's biblical, you know. He knows our name, and that ought to be assuring to us. But Jacob, Jacob, and Jacob answered, here I am, Lord. Just like, remember, Samuel was told by Eli, next time you hear Samuel, Samuel, say, here I am, Lord. And so that's what Jacob did. So he said, I'm the God of your father. There we see it again, God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. And I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes. So great promise. Great promise. Number 1 in the promise, do not fear. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. Perhaps Jacob was wondering, like, I thought that this land was going to be our land. This land was your land. This land was my land. From the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. But so how's that going to work when we're all starving to death? We got nothing left. We're at the end of our provisions, and now we're going to Egypt to perhaps just become slaves to someone that could satisfy our starvation. So how's that promise going to come to pass? Is all the promise about the land that you're going to do and make of us a nation, is that still going to happen? Well, don't be afraid to go to Egypt, the Lord says. For I will still make of you a great nation. And where am I going to do it? Down there. You're going to become a great nation down there. You're going to actually grow as exiles. So the promise, don't be afraid. I'm still going to make you a great nation. In verse 4, another part of the promise, you're not going to be alone. I will go down there with you. So whatever's going on in your life, whether it's exciting or terrifying or both or somewhere in the middle, big life change, big situations, big moves, he'll go with you there. That's part of the Great Commission Go into all the world and preach the gospel. And lo, I am with you. I don't know how many lows there are in the Bible, but I know the cattle are lowing in the Christmas song. But that's one lo. And lo, I am with you, even to the ends of the age. The Lord's with us. The Lord was with Jacob. And I will go down with you, verse 4. But the promise is also that I will bring you up again. You'll go down, but you'll come back up. Now, we know the prophecy was in Genesis 15 that they would go down and be slaves for a long period of time. It's part of the promise. How reassuring, right? But the Lord was just real with them. I'm going to do something. I'm going to glorify myself. I'm going to make a nation, teach a nation, correct a nation, form a nation, forge a nation. But I'm going to bring you up again. And then one last little bit of this glorious promise. And Joseph will put his hand in your eye. No, put his hand on your eye. I don't know what that means. It's funny, I read 3 different commentaries today, and there's certain things I'm like, no one explained that. What does that mean? And he will poke you in the eyeball, just like he did when he was a little kid. It'll be a nice trip down memory lane. When Lindsay had LASIK surgery probably 10 years ago, and 9 years ago, she had PKR surgery, if you know the difference. But so her eyes were healing. And she was resting on the bed, and I did what every good dad does, started wrestling with my 2-year-old on the bed. And Titus put his foot in her eye. It was horrible. Horrible. Let's just say a trip immediately to the eye doctor was in order, and can't believe I'm bringing that up. But I'm sure Jacob experienced a similar thing, and he will get Joseph's foot in his face. Someone who's a Bible scholar, look up, Joseph will put his hand on your eye and find out how sentimental that is. No, it was a greeting back then. But it is true that they would become a great nation down in Egypt. We see in Exodus 1:9, where the Egyptians are told by Pharaoh, look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. More and mightier than the Egyptians. And in Deuteronomy 26:5, we see that Israel had become a nation, great, mighty, and populous. So they would become a great nation over the course of 400 years. We're really getting ourselves set up for the book of Exodus in these final chapters here. Verse 5. Then Jacob arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their little ones, and their wives in the carts which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. So you remember the story was that Pharaoh just showed such great favor, he even provided the wagons to get Joseph's family down to salvation. And so verse 6, they took their livestock and their goods, which they'd acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to Egypt, Jacob and all his descendants with him. Something I just remembered as I read that was that Pharaoh had told them, don't worry about bringing any of your goods with you. Just get on down here. Just like when your friends invite you over and you're like, what can I bring? And they go, just bring your pretty old self, That's what Pharaoh was saying. Just get on down here. We'll have a good time, And yet Jacob was like, but I got some stuff. I got some good stuff, Put it in the wagon. Grandma's piano and the China hutch. Like the Oregon Trail, they brought way too much with them and had to dump it in the desert when they ran out of oxen to pull it with. It was like, but they brought the rocking chair and all the stuff. And we see in verse 7, his sons and his sons' sons and his sons' sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his descendants he brought with him to Egypt. These were the names of the children of Israel, Jacob and his sons who went to Egypt. right? So then we're going to have a list of all the children that were born to him by Rachel and Leah and the 2 concubines as well. We do see in verse 12, 2 of the grandsons were Ur and Onan, and it's referenced that they died in the land of Canaan. So they didn't go on this journey because they were very wicked men, and the Lord killed them. And so you read about that in Genesis 38. Last season we read about those wicked guys. So all of these names, all the way down through verse 26, names, names, names. And the names matter. They matter to the Lord enough to put it in the book by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. And verse 26 says, all the persons who went with Jacob to Egypt who came from his body, besides Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2 persons. All the persons of the house of Jacob were 70. And then he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen. So Jacob sends the faithful son Judah on ahead as scout. He's made this trip many times already, and he was kind of the waypoint along the journey. Verse 29, so Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And so just a wonderful reunion. And it's just written so eloquently that Joseph went and harnessed up the horses to his own chariot, almost ceremonially. And he presented himself to his dad. Just what an incredible reunion this must have been. So much so that Joseph fell on his dad's neck and wept on his neck a good while. Have you ever just had a good cry or a good wail, or you've just been so overwhelmed that you just have to bury your face in the neck of your friend or your mom or your sibling and just weep? For one reason, I've had many times like that in my life. And that's kind of what the picture is here. When we read fell on his neck, there was some sort of tackle that took place, some sort of side control jujitsu move, and then just kind of a rolling onto somebody's neck, which doesn't sound that great. But what it means here is he threw his arms around him. Just threw his arms around his dad. What an incredible thing. I cannot wait to get to heaven and throw my arms around Jesus, but throw my arms around my dad. This year is 25 years since I've seen my dad, and he passed away. And he was one of my best friends and my hero. And we were cleaning out the garage the other day, and I have this wooden box. I don't know where the box really came from. And it has a wooden lid. And whoever made this wooden box, I want to strangle, because they put no hinges on the lid. And so from my years at Calvary Chapel Corvallis, I have 4 pieces of gaff duct tape that at one point I put on this box, and they lost their stickiness along the years. And so this thing's just been on the shelf forever. And last winter I went through it and grabbed some things of my dad's out of there, and some of his rings and things, and a couple neat little trinkets and items, mementos from my dad. And cleaning out the garage again, kids found the box, they open it up, dad's wallet is in there. Well, of course, they're at the age where they're like, cha-chizing, and open it up, and what is there but 3 crisp, fresh, just $1 bills. We weren't rich people. $1 bills, Washingtons, from 1999, and Tatum's like, can I have these? Well, she gets the $3. Titus wants the wallet. But she was walking around with the money the other day and smelling it and hands me it. She's like, does this smell like your dad? And it totally smelled like my dad. Like it had some cologne smell to it. It was either my dad or someone else who was carrying it. And I was like, these dollars haven't passed hands in 25 years. They've been in one wallet for 25 years. And it just, smelling that and just made me think of my dad and slow down for just a second. And I can't wait to throw my arms around my long-lost dad. It's been longer than Joseph and Jacob were separated, but just a beautiful reunion here. And Israel said to Joseph in verse 30, now let me die, since I've seen your face, because you're still alive. So Joseph pulled out his sword and killed him. It was no, I'm just kidding. No, this let me die means I'm ready to die now. I can die a happy man because I've seen my son alive. And similar to in the book of Luke chapter 2, where Zacharias, the high priest, holds Jesus, baby Jesus, in his arms and blesses the Lord and says, now I can go because I've seen that you've brought the Messiah. And both of these men are just, their cup is filled in life. I can die a happy man. Anybody there tonight? I'm just kidding. Yeah.
That phrase, from what I just looked up, to put his hands on his eyes.
Oh, thank you.
Means his father has passed, and it means, so the promise is that he will outlive his father.
Oh, wow.
That was being promised then.
Good job. Thank you so much, Carrie. That makes total sense. And I'm sure if I would have just thought, probably could have come up with that. Telling a lot of dad stories tonight, but I laid my hands on my dad's eyes and closed his eyes when he passed away. So that's great. Yeah, thank you, Carrie. So Joseph would outlive his dad and be there on his deathbed. Yeah, thank you. Didn't think anyone would take me up on that offer to actually do my work for me tonight, but we'll give you guys some more opportunities here in the next half hour. So verse 31, then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house and who were in the land of Canaan have come to me, and the men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they've brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? That you shall say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth, even till now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. So we don't really know why a shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptian. Some of the thoughts of the way shepherds treated Egyptians made them woeful to the Egyptians, but that history actually doesn't come until after this account. Probably the best sense that I read on that was that kind of the Bedouin lifestyle or whatnot could tend to be gypsy-ish in nature. Chris gets to make up words on Sunday morning with orphanhood. By the way, I looked it up. It was good. Now look up gypsy-ish, okay? And being like, and kind of applicable to what our struggle is in our culture of resident aliens who are not contributors to the civilization, and that might maybe mooch off of the kingdom, and so the pharaohs would dislike that. But if they offered themselves up as those that could provide a service and be contributors to society, that would be more beneficial in the eyes of Pharaoh. So Genesis 47, then Joseph went and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan, and indeed they're in the land of Goshen. So real quick, map please, por favor. We'll just get a little look, and I think it should say Goshen unless I zoomed in. Okay, whoops. So, if you zoom in, you might lose what you were searching for. So over in this beautiful green part of Egypt, between Tanta and Cairo, is the land of Goshen, about where that highway is going through there. And thank you, little mouse. Such a good little mouse. I actually zoomed in on Google Earth and went to Street View and landed in a freshly plowed field with some poor soul that doesn't know that his face is forever on Google Earth with his leg bent like this because the camera messed him up. But very beautiful area there, lush and green, this land of Goshen. Verse 2 says, and he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Don't want to overwhelm with all 12. We'll just take 5, the fave 5. And Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, we've come to dwell in the land because your servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your fathers and your brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. So, such a generous Pharaoh here. Pharaoh meaning like king. The whole land is before you. Have your pick. If you want the land of Goshen, it's the best of the land. And he graciously gives, what are we, like 9-10 years into this famine here, or into the story of the dreams being fulfilled? And he's still honoring Joseph for being that wise interpreter of the dreams. And so he gives Jacob and his sons the best of the land. Reminds me of, I think it's Psalm 16:6. My pastor, Rob, always quotes it. And it's that the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. And my pastor would always say that. I just feel so blessed at where God's brought me and my family and our church and our home and just all these things. The lines or the lots have fallen to me in pleasant places. And it's just so good to see how God has been good to us in our life. And he is certainly causing the lines to fall for Jacob in pleasant places around the land of Goshen. And then he says, if you know any competent men, ever been looking to hire an employee for your business? And you just, in the ad, if you are competent or capable or even just able, that's what it means. It means if any one of you are competent, capable, or able, then I'm looking to hire on, Ranch World Ads, where you can hire folks. Pharaoh has had an ad out there for a while. And I'm looking for someone to watch my livestock too. And so Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. This is actually a pretty incredible scene. Pharaoh has heard about Father Jacob. Father Jacob had many sons, right? It's a different Sunday school version than probably you're familiar with. And there he is before him, and an interesting thing happens. Now, in the culture, the greater would bless the lesser, right? But in this case, who appears to be lesser, the exile, the vagabond, the wanderer, the sojourner, in probably somewhat worn and tattered clothes, just made the wagon ride, he's blessing the one who appears to be greater. And that's actually prophetic. It's prophetic of that there's a kingdom standing in front of Pharaoh that's going to be much larger than Egypt ever could be. And the one who's going to sit on that throne will sit on that throne forever and ever and will be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And the instance takes us back to Genesis 14 in the battle with the kings that Abraham had, where Melchizedek, who was the king of Salem, the king of peace, brings out the bread and the wine, and we studied that, how Melchizedek is either Jesus himself, actually, a Christophany in the Old Testament, or he's just an incredible type of Christ, and how Melchizedek blessed Abraham. And it says there in Hebrews chapter 7, I think, that the lesser is blessed by the greater there. So, so we have Jacob blessing Pharaoh, and Pharaoh responds with a President Trump-style question. Here it is, first words between the two, a blessing followed by President Trump in the Oval Office, looking behind his shoulder to whoever's visiting. You've seen all of the press conferences. And the question is, how old are you? Can't you just picture President Trump just like, how old are you? This guy, he's incredibly good looking for his age. He's actually older than I, and just then he goes into something. It's a Pharaoh question. How old are you? And yesterday I was in Ace Hardware and ran into a man I haven't seen for a while, great part of our church for many years, served us so well. And I said, hey, it's so good to see you. And are you retired? And are you still working? Oh, I've been retired for 3 years. Oh my goodness. We're talking, and he's talking about all of his retirement projects and how his body hurts and just hearing all about it. And I go, how old are you? That's a rude question normally, but I think at a certain, correct me if I'm wrong, I think at a certain age, if you really care, I'd like to know how old you are. I'm going to ask all the women in the room as we leave tonight. Maybe it's just because it was a man. I said, how old are you? He says, I'm 87. And it was Doc Curbo, if you guys know Doc Curbo, who served as an usher for many years here, wearing a Calvary Chapel t-shirt, And how old are you, Doc? And he said, I'm 87. And that blows my mind. I got my concealed carry permit by Doc Curbo. Not that I have it. I totally have it. But I remember taking the concealed carry class, and I was wondering, I just want to know the rules. Like, when is it okay to fire my firearm and not go to jail? He's like, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But if a criminal came through that door, I'd throw the recliner over like this, do a barrel roll, pop around, and peg him. I'm like, okay, but what's the law on that? Doesn't matter. And then I'd throw this down, and I'd grab Sandy. And they served us potato soup as part of the class. Fun fact, then we had to dismantle our pistols and clean them, and he'd teach us how to clean our pistols. Not that I didn't know already. And he's like, cool, let me see your barrel. And he grabs my barrel, and he looks in it. And I had wore my pistol elk hunting for protection against wildcats, and somehow a wildflower had gone up the barrel, broken off, and stayed in there perfectly symmetrical inside that. And he, let me see your barrel, boy. You've been cleaning your pistola? What in tarnation? And I'm like, so I've kept it there, haven't fired it since. The day that happens, got a little off track, you guys, but I'm back. How old are you, Doc? How old are you, Jacob? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, it's been a hard life. It's been a tough one. That's basically what he says. He says, the days of the years of my pilgrimage. And then Pharaoh starts thinking, this is going to be a long story, isn't it? Are 130 years. Few and evil have been the years of my life. 130 years are few? Short life already, I'll tell you that. And instead of evil, maybe the translation would be hard or difficult. I've had a difficult life. And, he's had a pretty good life. he's had some difficult times. James Montgomery Boyce says, you're going to hear it the rest of this chapter, a couple times that he has a pity party for himself. But many of the pity parties that he's sad about were his own doing, of his own deception, of his own trickery, of compromise, of not going where the Lord was calling him to go, stopping halfway, all those kinds of things. So, there's a little bit of maybe a pity party there, but the days of my life, 130 years, poor and evil. Is that what he says? Oh, short and evil. Few and evil. And they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage or sojournings. So, Job tells us in 14:1, man who is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. So that's just life, right? But Genesis tells us in 25:7 that Abraham lived 175 years. And Isaac lived 180 years. And this guy's already 135. He doesn't know how much longer he has. He's going to end up living, spoiler alert, 17 more years after this point. 17 more years back in the arms of dad, really living in the lap of luxury in Pharaoh's kingdom there. What verse am I on? Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Looks like I might have jumped ahead, did I? Jacob blessed Pharaoh. I feel like I already just preached about that in the whole Melchizedek thing. Anyways, you're welcome. And Joseph situated his fathers and his brothers. He situated them. Have you ever done that with your children? It's a good way to put it. Like, they were fighting in the back seat, so I resituated them. He accommodated his father and his brothers, and he gave them possession in the land of Egypt and the best of the land, in the land of Nacho Libre, Ramses. If you've ever seen Nacho Libre, the great wrestler in the movie's name is I must fight Ramses, But interesting, Ramses wouldn't have been known then. Ramses is from Moses' day. So as Moses writes this, he's referring to, well, you would know because you live with me. I'm Moses. Everyone knows Ramses, the great wrestler. Just as Pharaoh had commanded. Then Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all of his father's household with bread according to the number in their families. Now, there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. The word languish there speaks of it being exhausted. The land was just worn out and dried up and profiting nothing. And Joseph, verse 14, gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So we know from the previous chapters that as Joseph got all the grain provided, that people would have to buy the grain. It wasn't charity. He stored up the grain so that there was grain to buy. And so we're going to see money and business being mentioned here. And I apologize ahead of time because that's my wife's department, not mine. And it's probably some of your departments. So you're going to find this interesting, the shrewd businessman that Joseph is and that Pharaoh is, and the system that they create to save the people and to also build Pharaoh's kingdom. So Joseph is shrewd on behalf of Pharaoh from this point on. He had a job to do. He was given this task as governor, and he's going to do it. And it's not going to seem super pleasant, especially looking back from a 2026 what kind of a system do we have? We're not communists. We're not socialists. Capitalists, right? I don't know about some of you. I've seen some commies in the room a few times, but so money, it's important. Brings it into Pharaoh's house, and the money's going to fail in verse 15. Fails in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan. All the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Then Joseph says, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock, if the money's gone." And so they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with the bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. And so the bread and the need for bread was greater than the possession of the livestock. And as a beef eater, that's confusing to me, except that if your animal is starving to death, it's not of a lot of use for you to be consuming, right? So bread is going to fill the bread basket, but the shriveled up donkey and livestock is not. So horses, all the commodities here, the livestock, are traded for the commodity of bread there. And so verse 18, when that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We will not hide from the Lord that our money's gone." Ding dong, in the middle of the night, Pharaoh answers the door. "I'm going to level with you, Pharaoh. I'm out of money, and I'm out of grain, and I'm out of livestock. But boy, have I got a deal for you. I still have myself," right? And so that's what they're going to offer. "We're not going to lie from you that our money's gone." Verse 18, "My Lord also has our herds and our livestock. There's nothing left in the sight of the Lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." So it's better to be slaves. At that point in starvation and poverty, you're out of bargaining chips, and the drastic times call for drastic measures. We would rather be slaves than die. And James Montgomery Boyce wrote his commentary, I think, in the early 80s, and he made the correlation that kind of slaves, no matter where you are, the amount of taxes that you might pay or whatnot, and getting some sort of provisions, right? And so one type of slavery or another, at least in this case, and these are the Egyptians that are saying this, and these are the nations around there. And so verse 20, "Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's." And it's interesting to read secular historians write about how Pharaoh ended up, at this point on, having all of the land belong to him. And we see how that came about. It's in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. The system that's set up here is going to become one of a feudal system of the Middle Ages. And so it was a way to provide for the people, but also enlarge the empire. And so as far as the people, verse 21, "He moved them into the cities from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end." Get the people off my land, make cities for them, essentially. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their lands. And my friends, this is why I became a priest. I read this when I was a youth, and I thought, those guys, they know what's up. And I will always have my bread basket full. Then Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as for food for your little ones. And so they said, you've saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Pharaoh made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day that Pharaoh should have 1/5 except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. And kind of like our system, we give 1/5 to the state of Oregon and 1/5 to the federal government, and that's it. And we get to keep the rest. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, that might not be true. Percentages might be a little off there. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, verse 27, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And so that promise from the Lord to Jacob that their nation would grow down in this land is taking place now. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Put your hands on my eyes." All right, okay. He said, "Now if I found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thighs." Okay, no, he really did say that. You see this throughout the scripture, that a way to make a covenant and a pledge was to warm your hands up under the person's thigh. That lost popularity in the mid-'80s here in the U.S., but before that, it was very common. You didn't have to tell anyone that you were going to do it. They like to suppress, and that was how the covenant was made. That's one of my questions I have for the Lord when I die. Lord, should I put the hand under the thigh thing? I have so many witty comments that might be good to just keep to myself right now. Still you got to keep it to yourself, or you just can't do it. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. Okay, so put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. I want to be where the people are. I want to be where my people are. I want to be back in the land, buried next to my wife and wives. And I want to be back in the promised land. Please don't bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. The cave bought by Abraham, the cave of Machpelah. And Joseph says, "I will do as you said." Just a great son. And he said, "Swear to me." And so he swore to him. And so Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. And that language, that's kind of different for us, bowed himself on the head of the bed. And the language speaks of like him bowing in thankfulness. Or another translation is that he bowed himself on his staff in kind of an authoritative way, but with thankfulness. So that's Genesis 46 and 47. And next week we'll do 48 and 49. And then the last week we'll do one chapter 50. So I thought our worship leader would be out here, but I know they're doing a scavenger hunt outside. And I asked if we could join, because I think we all want to find cool stuff around this building, right? So will you guys stand with me and we'll close in prayer. Lord, just as we read the history here, I know for me, it's just easy to kind of get lost in the details and the interesting facts and cultural just idiosyncrasies there and really the not important stuff, God. And so we just want to meditate for a moment before we leave tonight on just your continuing of bringing about the promise to Eve and Adam of that seed being preserved, and even Judah today, that the Messiah would come through, showing the way, guiding the way, Lord, just as you do, Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And we're just so thankful that you are the God that just hears our worship and our prayers, as you did at the beginning of chapter 46, and you know Jacob by name and Samuel by name and Saul by name, and we just know that you are so intimately familiar with us, God. Just encourage the people in this room tonight and the different trials and struggles that they're going through. Just encourage them that you know their name. And the promise is for them as well, that don't be afraid. Go on the path I'm showing you. I'll be with you. I'll go down with you. I'll come back up with you. I'm going to be faithful. We just trust in you, that faithful God. We just thank you tonight and worship you in the way that the lines have fallen to us in pleasant places. And we just rejoice in your provision. We just pray that the God of Jacob, the God of Isaac, the God of Abraham would just be our God as well in this place. Provide for our every need. Some of us feel like we're still Joseph in the pit or in the prison. And Lord, would you just bring into our trial that cupbearer with a dream that would lead us to the Pharaoh, that would open doors and provide and protect and care. Let's do that in your faithful ways, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, thank you guys for being here. I know spring is busy. Lainey had a track meet in Bend, and I was tempted to drive over and rush back, and I just said, that's just not wisdom. We all have nice spring things, but I'm glad you spent time with us here today. So if you guys don't mind helping pack the tables up, that would be amazing. You're always so good about that. And thanks for everyone who contributed food. I think we ate every last drop and every last cookie